Why did Madison Brooks always glance twice at the same shadow? It wasn't paranoia. It was memory. The kind of memory that never really leaves your bloodstream, like the echo of a battlefield, disguised beneath the quiet rhythm of a farm life that never quite feels earned. At 2 in the afternoon, sunlight poured through her kitchen window, clean, gold, steady, the kind of light that made everything look harmless. Madison stood by the counter, her hands sunk deep in bread dough. Flour coated her wrists, her faded jeans, even the corner of her cheek where she'd pushed away a strand of blonde hair. Everything about her seemed ordinary, peaceful, almost cinematic in its simplicity. The quiet kind of woman small towns love to talk about. The new girl out by the old Miller farm, they'd whisper at the market. Sweet thing, keeps to herself, must have come here to heal from something. They weren't wrong, she had. But no one in Millbrook, Indiana, not the kind-eyed butcher, not the widowed librarian, not even Sheriff Davidson, knew from what. Her house sat alone at the end of a gravel road that dissolved into cornfields, 40 acres of land, trees, and silence. To anyone passing by, it was the definition of calm. But to Madison, every creak, every gust, every unfamiliar sound held a weight she could measure. She learned long ago that peace isn't the absence of danger, it's what danger sounds like when it's sleeping. She pressed her thumbs into the dough again, methodically, rhythmically, the motion grounding her. She didn't bake because she loved it. She baked because it required focus. Focus meant stillness. Stillness meant no flashbacks. The flour-dusted countertop was her battlefield now. She wasn't supposed to still think like a soldier, but old instincts refused to retire. Outside, wind rattled the barn door. She didn't flinch, just tilted her head slightly, like she used to when listening for distant movement through radio static. A lifetime ago, in another uniform, in another desert. She traded her rifle for a rolling pin, but her body didn't know the difference. It never would. That afternoon, she moved through the motions, tending to her chickens, checking the generator, scanning the tree line for anything that didn't belong. Her neighbors, miles away, assumed she did it out of habit, but Madison didn't do habits. She did protocols, observation patterns, defensive readiness, the kind of things most people didn't think about until it was too late. Somewhere between feeding the hens and locking the coop, she paused, a hand resting on the latch. The breeze shifted direction. She felt it before she heard it. A faint mechanical hum far off, maybe a truck or a tractor. Normal, if not for one thing. It stopped too suddenly. She stood still, her eyes tracing the horizon beyond the corn rows. Nothing moved. No dust cloud, no headlights, just open country and the stretch of a late summer sky. After a moment, she exhaled, telling herself it was probably a farmer turning off an engine. Probably. But Madison had lived too many lives to trust probably. When she went back inside, she double-locked the door, something she hadn't done in months. 12 hours later, 5 men gathered around a dirty kitchen table 60 miles away. They weren't farmers, they weren't planners either. They were desperate, and desperation makes men think they're smarter than they are. Tommy Castellano, self-appointed leader, spread a handful of photographs across the table like a poker hand. In the dim light, the images looked harmless: a farmhouse, a woman, some fields. But the way Tommy smiled told a different story. "Look at this place," he said. "Middle of nowhere, one woman, no neighbors, paid cash for the land, that's easy money." The others leaned in. Marcus Webb, his thick cousin, nodded like an obedient dog. Rico Santos twirled a switchblade between his fingers, restless, bored, cruel. Jake Morrison, barely 22, stared at the photos like he wasn't sure if this was a good idea anymore. And Vince Kowalski, the driver, stayed quiet, his eyes colder, older. He'd served in the army once. He recognized something in the woman's posture that unsettled him, though he didn't know why. "Where'd you find her?" Marcus asked. "Followed her from the bank," Tommy replied, tapping one of the photos. "She deposited $5 grand in cash, then drove straight home. You know what that means. There's more where that came from. Rico laughed under his breath. So what? We scare the little farm girl till she coughs it up. Easy. But Vince's gaze didn't leave the photo. Something's off, he muttered. The way she stands, shoulders squared like she's used to carrying weight. That's not some city girl pretending to be country. Tommy waved him off. You're overthinking. It's just a woman with a hobby farm and too much land. Still, Vince's instincts whispered otherwise. He'd known soldiers, real ones, and there was something about her stance, even in still images, that spoke of discipline. But he said nothing. No one listened to the voice of caution in a room full of greed. They made their plan. Tomorrow night, quick job in and out. They thought they were hunting a victim. They didn't realize they were walking straight into a lesson. At 9:00 p.m. back on the farm, Madison lay in bed with a book open across her chest. The world was quiet. Too quiet. She told herself she'd earned this peace, but peace, for her, always felt like the pause before impact. Her mind drifted to the desert, to the heat, to the mission she never spoke about. The one that got her discharged. 8 years in special operations, 6 tour, 1 classified. She'd done things even her nightmares refused to replay in full. Her last mission, the incident, had involved orders she didn't agree with, a rescue that went wrong, a child who shouldn't have died. The Army called it an unfortunate collateral. Madison called it betrayal. She questioned the chain of command, and the chain had snapped on her. They offered her a choice: retirement with honors, or a court-martial that would bury her reputation and freedom. She'd taken the first option, but part of her knew she hadn't really left. You don't walk away from that kind of life. You just change your battlefield. Her phone buzzed once, a security alert from her perimeter sensors. False alarms happened sometimes: animals, wind, technical glitches. She opened the app, scanned the feed. A car parked too far down the gravel road to be casual, not moving. Her stomach tightened. A familiar sensation, not fear, but readiness, spread through her body like muscle memory waking up from a long sleep. She turned off the lamp, slipped out of bed, and crossed to the window. The night was thick, cloudy, moonless. She couldn't see much, but she didn't need to. Her ears picked up the faint, rhythmic creak of metal, like someone shifting their weight inside a parked car. For a long moment she said nothing, just breathed, counted the heartbeats. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "I guess we're doing this again," she whispered. She moved silently to the basement, lifted the rug that hid an old chest bolted to the floor. The lock clicked open under her hand. Inside, memories, regrets, and equipment the Army had never officially issued her. She ran her fingers over each piece: the black rifle, the night vision scope, the compact radio. Her old life preserved in steel and silence. She didn't want this life anymore, but it had come looking for her. By midnight she'd checked every window, every angle, every line of sight. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. Whoever they were, they'd made one mistake, assuming her quiet meant weak. It didn't. It meant ready. Outside, somewhere beyond the cornfield, 5 men were convincing themselves she was asleep. She was. She hadn't really slept in years. By 2 a.m., the gravel road hummed with the low roll of tires. Vince's sedan crept forward, headlights off, cutting through the dark like a secret. He parked half a mile from the farmhouse, engine whispering into silence. The air was wet with the smell of soil and distant rain. "Remember," Tommy whispered, loading a sawed-off shotgun. "Quiet till we're inside." Rico smirked. "I'm always quiet." Jake's hands trembled as he checked his pistol. He didn't like this. He never liked this. But he needed money, and Tommy promised it would be easy. "Just a farm girl," he muttered under his breath. They moved across the field in a crouch, shoes sinking into damp soil. No lights, no sounds, just darkness and adrenaline. To them it felt like control. To Madison, watching through the thermal scope from her upstairs window, it looked like choreography. She tracked each one, labeled them in her mind the way she'd done with insurgents. One leader, two muscle, one erratic, one professional. She almost pitied them. Almost. When they reached the back porch, Rico knelt to pick the lock. His fingers worked fast, too fast. Madison almost admired the efficiency. 23 seconds, she timed it. The door creaked open. 4 shadows slipped inside. They thought they were the hunters. They were already the lesson. Madison waited until all 4 had crossed the kitchen floor. Her finger hovered over a remote switch on her nightstand, custom wired into her lighting system. A single press flooded every bulb in the house at once. She pressed it. The effect was blinding. The men froze mid-step, weapons half-drawn, disoriented by the sudden glare. And then they heard it, a voice, calm, female, controlled. "Gentlemen," she said from somewhere behind them, "I think we need to have a conversation." Every muscle in the room tensed. The voice was steady, not the panicked shriek of a frightened woman. It was measured, lethal, and utterly in command. Tommy spun toward the sound. "Who the hell?" "Drop your weapons," she said. "Hands where I can see them." Her tone carried something unmistakable, authority. The kind that made soldiers obey even before they understood why. Rico's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The silence, the calm, the way her words landed like they'd been trained to do, none of this was normal. And when she spoke again, every drop of blood in their veins went cold. "You're outnumbered," Tommy said, trying to regain control. "4 of us, 1 of you." 4.5, she replied smoothly. "You left your driver outside, Vince Kowalski, 3 years Army, dishonorable discharge for assault, currently sitting in a stolen sedan northeast of this location." The men froze. How did she know that name? Rico's heart thudded. Tommy's confidence cracked. Jake's hands shook. Marcus took a step back. Madison Brooks smiled in the shadows. "I've been expecting you." How do you win a fight without firing a shot? Madison Brooks had learned the answer years ago. Control the fear before it controls you. And tonight, fear didn't belong to her. The farmhouse glowed like a stage set under interrogation lights. The 4 men stood motionless in the living room, pupils shrinking under the brightness. Their eyes darted, searching corners, walls, doorways, anywhere she could be. But Madison stayed out of sight, her voice drifting like a ghost through the house's old bones. "Drop your weapons," she repeated, steady, detached. 5 seconds. Rico's finger twitched on his trigger. His instincts, honed in prison cells and street corners, screamed ambush. He tried to pinpoint her position, but her voice bounced upstairs, downstairs, behind them like it belonged everywhere and nowhere. He'd been in dangerous houses before, but this one breathed danger. Tommy tried to speak, to sound in control, but his voice cracked. "Listen, lady." 4 seconds, Madison interrupted. Her tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. That calmness, that clinical precision, was worse than shouting. It sounded like someone who didn't panic because she didn't have to. Marcus swallowed hard. "You don't want to do this, we just came for the money." 3 seconds. Jake whispered, trembling, "Tommy, maybe we should." "Shut up," Tommy hissed, but his own voice faltered. Rico slowly lifted his free hand. He didn't know who she was yet, but his gut told him this woman wasn't bluffing. "All right," he said. "Everybody calm down." 2 seconds, Madison said softly. The sound of safety clicks filled the room, 4 men lowering their weapons, 1 heartbeat at a time. "Good," she said, the word clipped and deliberate. "Now move to the center of the room, hands where I can see them." Tommy hesitated. You don't have to." "Move." Something in her tone made even Rico obey. They shuffled together under the glare, weapons on the floor, hands raised like schoolboys caught stealing. Madison waited a beat before stepping into view. And when she did, silence took form. She descended the stairs slowly, not as a woman defending her home, but as a soldier evaluating a perimeter. Black tactical pants, worn combat boots, a dark-fitted shirt that showed lean, scarred muscle. Her blonde hair was tied in a military bun, her stance perfectly balanced. But it was her eyes, cold, trained, assessing, that told the truth. Tommy blinked, confused. Who are you?" Madison didn't answer right away. She let their imaginations fill the silence, let them wonder how much she already knew. Then finally, "Staff Sergeant Madison Brooks," she said. "United States Army, Delta Force, 8 years active duty." Jake's mouth fell open. That's not possible." "It's not supposed to be," she replied. She moved like she'd done this before because she had. Every step controlled, measured, non-threatening but absolute. She kept her rifle low but ready, the barrel steady enough that not one of them dared blink wrong. Rico muttered, "This ain't right, she's bluffing." "Am I?" Madison's gaze landed on him. "Rico Santos, 8 years in Terre Haute Federal, released 6 months ago. Parole officer thinks you're working construction. You're not. You're running numbers for the Torino family out of Chicago." Rico's jaw clenched. Tommy turned to him, eyes wide. "How the hell?" "Tommy Castellano," she continued, cutting him off. 3 failed heists, 2 convictions, thinks he's smarter than he is." Tommy's face flushed crimson. "Marcus Webb," she said, glancing at the big man beside him, "followed your cousin into this life because you don't know how to think for yourself. You owe $4,700 to a payday lender in Gary." Marcus's lip trembled. Madison's voice stayed calm, detached. "Jake Morrison, 22, first offense. No record, lives with his mother. You took this job to pay for her surgery." Jake's eyes filled with tears. How could you possibly?" "Because I'm not the one who's been watched tonight," she said. "You are." Rico stared at her in disbelief. You've been spying on us." "For 6 days," Madison said. "You thought you were watching me. You were. Every time you drove by, every time you parked near my property, every grocery trip, every movement logged, recorded, and analyzed." Tommy's jaw tightened. "You're insane." "Possibly," she said, "but efficient." She turned slightly toward the window and keyed a small radio on her belt. "Vince, this is Sergeant Brooks," she said. "I can see you standing by the car. Blue jacket, cell phone in your left hand. Wave if you can hear me." Through the window, a faint movement, a hand raised. Every man in the room turned pale. "Now hang up," she continued. "Come inside, slowly, hands where I can see them." Rico muttered under his breath, "Holy hell." When Vince finally entered, the air changed. He looked at her, really looked, and knew instantly what she was. Military recognized military, the stance, the precision, the way her finger never left the trigger guard. This woman wasn't bluffing. "What the hell is this?" Vince said, voice gravel low. "Who are you?" "Someone you shouldn't have met," Madison said. She waited until the door shut behind him, then gestured to the living room. "Sit." None of them moved. "Sit," she repeated, quieter this time and somehow more dangerous for it. They obeyed. For a moment she said nothing, just watched them, listened to their breathing, fast, uneven, desperate. Fear smelled familiar. It reminded her of interrogation tents, of places where she'd been the one asking questions. Old reflexes came back too easily. "You know," she said finally, "you 5 made 3 major mistakes tonight." Tommy swallowed hard. "Mistakes?" "First," Madison said, packing slowly, "surveillance. You thought you were invisible. You were. You parked the same vehicle in view of my property 3 days in a row. You used the same route in and out. Amateurs." Rico's eyes followed her. He wasn't angry now. He was curious, studying her the way predators study other predators. "Second," she continued, "intelligence. You learned my name, my address, my schedule, but not who I am. A basic background check would have saved you this trip." Jake flinched when she said it. as if realizing how stupid it all sounded now. And third, she said, stopping directly in front of them, operational discipline. You brought 5 men to rob a single woman. You used real names, unregistered firearms, no gloves. You increased your exposure by 300%. Tommy's voice cracked. What do you want? Money. You want us gone. We'll go. We're sorry. Madison's head tilted slightly. You came here to take from me, she said. So now I decide what I take from you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, with one swift movement, she lifted a manila envelope from the coffee table and dropped it between them. The flap opened, photographs, documents, records spilling out. Rico picked one up, a surveillance shot of himself at a diner 2 days ago. His face went pale. Another photo showed Tommy's apartment, Marcus's pickup, Jake's mother's house. Every page revealed something new: addresses, criminal records, personal details. How? Tommy stammered. Military intelligence doesn't disappear, Madison said. Some people still answer when I call. Vince exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. So what's the play, Sergeant? You going to turn us in? She studied him for a long moment. I haven't decided yet. Rico tensed. Lady, if you think. Don't, she said sharply, raising the rifle an inch. Don't finish that sentence. Her voice softened, but her eyes didn't. Do you know what 8 years in Special Forces teaches you? That not every threat deserves a bullet. Sometimes what breaks a man isn't death, it's living with what he's done. Jake's breath hitched. I could call Sheriff Davidson right now, she continued, holding up her phone. He'd be here in 12 minutes. You'd be cuffed, processed, and your lives would unravel the way you've unraveled others. But then what? You'd serve time, get out, do it again. The world doesn't change that way. Marcus whispered, Then what do you want from us? Madison's gaze lingered on him. Understanding, she said, and consequences. She turned the rifle sideways, no longer a threat but still heavy with implication. Here, how this goes. You're going to listen. You're going to remember. And if you ever do this again to anyone, I will find you. Tommy forced a laugh that died in his throat. You think you can scare us straight? Madison leaned closer until her voice dropped to a near whisper. I've scared worse men than you into silence. Something in her tone, not arrogance, not threat, but certainty, made his blood run cold. Why are you doing this? Jake asked softly. You could have just shot us. Madison paused. Because once a man under my command made a mistake, she said quietly. He pulled a trigger too fast. A child died because of it. I won't make that mistake again. The room stilled. For the first time, the men saw not just a soldier, but a woman carrying something heavier than any rifle. Vince spoke carefully. So what happens to us now? Madison looked at him, the only one who seemed to understand. Now, she said, you learn what accountability feels like. Outside, the wind rose through the cornfields, that low, whispering sound that always comes before a storm. Inside, 5 men sat surrounded by the wreckage of their own choices, realizing they walked into something far bigger than a robbery. Madison stood near the window, watching the darkness beyond her land. She didn't feel triumph, only a quiet ache in her chest. She'd wanted peace, but peace, she'd learned, wasn't given. It was guarded. And sometimes the only way to protect it was to remind the world why they should never underestimate a quiet woman. What happens when power shifts and no one knows what to do with it? The 5 men sat scattered across Madison's living room, weapons on the floor, fear thick as the smell of gun oil. The lights above them hummed. Outside, wind brushed the siding like invisible fingers. The night no longer belonged to them. It belonged to her. Madison stood by the window, half silhouetted, rifle resting lightly against her shoulder. To anyone watching, she looked calm. But inside, something burned, not anger, not adrenaline, focus. That razor-edge clarity that used to hit her seconds before a mission went loud. She promised herself She'd buried that part of her years ago. She'd been wrong. "Let's make something clear," she said at last, voice low. "You broke into my home. You came here armed, intending to take what wasn't yours. That means you don't leave until I decide how this ends." Tommy shifted, forcing bravado into his tone. "You can't keep us here. You're breaking the law." Madison turned her head slightly, just enough for her eyes to meet his. "The law. The law that lets you crawl out of prison and do it again. The law that discharged me for saving civilians instead of following orders." She stepped closer. "You forfeited that shield the moment you crossed my fence line." No one answered. She set her rifle gently against the wall, deliberate, visible, then walked to the table where their weapons lay. One by one, she cleared each firearm with mechanical precision, ejecting magazines, racking slides, leaving them harmless. The metallic clicks echoed like punctuation marks. "Tell me," she said without looking up, "was this supposed to make you rich, or just make you feel powerful?" Rico snorted, half defensive. "People like us don't get choices. Power's the only thing that listens." Madison paused. "Then maybe you've been listening to the wrong voice." She finished disassembling the last pistol and looked up. "You know what power really is, Rico? Walking into a room where men like you expect weakness, and watching their fear catch up to reality." His eyes met hers, and for the first time he looked away. She turned to Jake. "You," she said softly, "you're different." Jake swallowed, hands trembling in his lap. I just needed my mom." "I know," Madison interrupted. "Surgery, hospital refused coverage." She reached into a side drawer and pulled out a small business card, sliding it across the table. "Call this number in the morning. Veterans Assistance Fund. They'll help you. Tell them I sent you." He stared at the card like it might explode. "Why would you help me after?" "Because one bad decision doesn't have to define you," she said. "But it will if you keep pretending it wasn't yours." The words landed heavier than any threat. Rico exhaled sharply. "What is this? Some kind of moral lecture? You going to fix all of us, huh?" Madison's gaze drifted toward him, steady and flat. "I don't fix people. I just remind them what they broke." Vince leaned forward slowly, forearms resting on his knees. He was the only one not pretending courage anymore. "You're not turning us in, are you?" Madison studied him, the ex-soldier turned getaway driver. "Would that make you sleep better tonight?" "Honestly," he said, "yeah." She shook her head. "I don't sleep better from paperwork." He nodded once. He understood. Soldiers always understood the space between justice and consequence. Madison lifted the manila envelope again, spreading the files wider across the table. "These," she said, "are your lives. Every arrest, every alias, every debt, every victim. Took me 3 days." Tommy tried to sound skeptical. "You expect us to believe you got all that legally?" Her lips twitched. "I didn't say legally, I said effectively." The silence that followed was the kind that changes people, the sound of realization settling in. She had them completely. "Hear how this goes," Madison said, packing slowly in front of them. "You get one chance. Walk out of here tonight alive and free, and you use that freedom to build something decent. But you break that deal even once and you disappear." Marcus frowned. "Disappear?" "Ask Tommy what that means," she said, eyes never leaving them. "He's done 3 jobs that went bad. You think it's luck his old partners are either in prison or missing?" Tommy's mouth opened, closed again. He didn't have a good answer. Madison leaned forward. "I do my research. When people threaten me, I remove the threat, permanently." For a while the only sound was the wind clawing the shutters. Somewhere outside a dog barked, distant and small. Jake flinched. Madison didn't. She walked to the corner table and poured a glass of water, hands steady. "You ever notice," she said quietly, "how criminals always think the victim's the weak one?" No one replied. "It's funny," she went on. You spend all this energy proving how tough you are, but the second someone stands their ground, the second a woman refuses to be afraid, you start to shake. Tommy snapped, "You don't know us." Madison turned, eyes sharp. "I know enough. I know Marcus hides behind you because he's afraid to think. I know Rico's still loyal to men who left him to rot in a cell. I know Jake, pretending he's not scared when all he wants is forgiveness. And you, Tommy," she took a step closer, "you mistake cruelty for leadership." He looked away first. "You see," she said almost softly, "I don't need a gun to make you small." For a moment, something unexpected passed through her expression, not anger but fatigue, the kind that comes from carrying too many ghosts. She poured herself another glass, stared out at the cornfield swaying under moonlight. Her reflection in the window looked like someone she used to be, someone she'd promised she'd never become again. 8 years of service, 6 tours, one classified mission that cost her everything she believed about right and wrong. She still saw their faces, the civilians caught in the crossfire. The young soldier who disobeyed her direct order because his conscience was louder than protocol. The blast, the silence that followed, the hearing, the discharge. They told her she could walk away clean. But nothing about guilt is clean. Sometimes she wondered if she'd bought the farm to grow food, or to bury the parts of herself she couldn't forgive. And now here she was again, weapon in hand, command in her voice, 5 men waiting on her judgment. Different battlefield, same war. Jake broke the silence first. "You're not going to hurt us, are you?" Madison turned, expression unreadable. "That depends," she said. "Do you plan to hurt anyone else?" He shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Rico rubbed his temples. "And if one of us slips, you'll what come after us?" Madison nodded once. "If I have to." Tommy laughed bitterly. "You really think you can keep track of 5 people for the rest of your life?" Madison didn't answer. She simply reached into her pocket and dropped a small black tracking tag onto the table. "Battery life, 18 months. Range, 500 meters. You parked your car too close." Vince stared at it, then at her. "You tagged our vehicles." "During your approach," she said matter-of-factly. "Motion sensors did the rest." Tommy's laugh died in his throat. The realization hit like a gut punch. This wasn't improvisation. She'd prepared for them before they'd even chosen the date. "You don't get it," Madison said quietly. "This isn't revenge, it's insurance." She picked up her rifle again, not raising it, just holding it like the extension of herself it had always been. "You think tonight's about money. It's not. It's about boundaries. I spent 8 years keeping people safe from monsters. Turns out, some monsters come home wearing your own country's face." Her voice softened, almost like confession. "I tried to live quiet, I really did, but peace doesn't last long when predators smell stillness." No one spoke. Finally Vince nodded slowly. "So what now?" "Now," Madison said, "you walk away, you get in your cars, you go home. Tomorrow you start over clean. And once a month you'll send proof that you're still on that path. Employment records, pay stubs, doesn't matter how, just proof." Tommy's mouth twisted. "And if we do?" Madison met his eyes. "Then I stop giving warnings." The way she said it, calm, final, left no room for argument. Minutes passed before anyone moved. Then Vince stood first, giving a short, almost respectful nod, the kind soldiers exchange when they've seen something they'll never forget. "You were good at your job," he said quietly. Madison's gaze didn't soften. "Still am." He gestured for the others. "Let's go." Tommy hesitated. "You expect us to just leave?" "Yes," Madison said, "and pray you never see me again." One by one, they moved toward the door. Marcus muttered something about God under his breath. Rico paused beside her, studying her face like he wanted to memorize it. "You really killed people overseas." Madison didn't blink. "I eliminated threats." He gave a slow nod. Guess we got lucky you changed battlefields. Luck, she said, is just timing without discipline. He left. When the last taillight disappeared down the gravel road, Madison finally exhaled. The silence returned, heavy, absolute. She leaned the rifle against the wall and sank into the chair by the window. Her hands trembled for the first time all night. The adrenaline crash came like it always did, a wave that made her feel both weightless and hollow. She stared out across the dark fields, waiting for the tremor to pass. She wasn't proud of what she'd done. She wasn't ashamed either. Somewhere in between there was just understanding. She hadn't chosen to become their judge, but the world had a way of pushing people into roles they didn't want. In the distance, a faint rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon. Rain was coming, the cleansing kind that makes the air smell new again. She hoped it would wash away the night. She took one last look at the empty road, whispering almost to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it just acts. Then she turned off the lights. And for the first time in years, Madison Brooks felt still. How quiet can a house feel before it starts to echo back your thoughts? For Madison Brooks, the answer came just before sunrise. The storm had passed sometime around 4 a.m. A slow, sweeping rain that rinsed the earth clean and left everything smelling like wet soil and new beginnings. She hadn't slept. She sat by the kitchen window, coffee cooling beside her, watching droplets slide down the glass. Outside, her fields shimmered in morning mist. Inside, the air still carried traces of adrenaline, faint metallic, almost electric. The same taste she remembered from missions overseas. The moment after violence doesn't happen. Her rifle leaned against the wall by the door, unloaded now but still within reach. Some habits never retired, no matter how many acres of peace you tried to bury them under. She told herself it was over, that the 5 men were gone, that she'd bought herself more time, maybe even safety. But the quiet didn't sound safe anymore. It sounded like memory breathing again. She reached for her coffee and realized her hands were shaking. Not fear, fatigue. The kind that lives in bone marrow, where duty and exhaustion mix until they're indistinguishable. 8 years of conditioning doesn't wash out easily. The body remembers every command. Breathe slow, think fast, never let them see your fear. The hardest part, she thought, was remembering you don't have to anymore. But that was the thing about Madison. She didn't know how to stop serving. She just changed the battlefield. Her eyes drifted to the table. The manila envelope still lay open, files spread like broken promises, the thieves' faces staring up at her in grainy black and white. She should have destroyed them, burned the evidence, deleted the backups, cleaned every trace. Instead, she studied them again. Jake Morrison, 22, lost, scared, trying to buy time for a sick mother. Marcus Webb, big-hearted fool, following his cousin into quicksand. Rico Santos, predator by design, survivor by necessity. Tommy Castellano, all arrogance, no discipline. Vince Kowalski, ex-soldier, dishonorable discharge, a man who'd once believed in something and then lost it. 5 different men, 5 different versions of desperation. She'd seen them all before, in different uniforms, under different flags. War, she'd learned, doesn't always wear camouflage. Sometimes it wears tattoos and leather jackets and thinks it's invisible. She looked at the faces again and whispered, "You should have picked another farm." But there was no victory in her voice, only a weary ache. The clock ticked to 6. Madison finally stood, her back cracking softly. She moved through the house, checking locks, resetting motion sensors, rearming the silent perimeter system she'd built herself. Each click, each code entry, each light returning from red to green gave her mind something solid to hold onto. She'd spent years creating layers of distance between herself and the world. Fences, alarms, self-sufficiency, all the invisible barriers people mistake for independence. But what it really was armor. And armor, she knew, wasn't built to keep the world out. It was built to keep what's inside from escaping. By the time the sun climbed over the tree line, Madison was outside, walking the field. The wet grass soaked her boots, the air crisp with the smell of corn and ozone. Morning light slid across the land, turning every droplet into a glinting shard. She stopped halfway down the path and looked back at her house, the only structure for miles. From a distance it looked ordinary again, peaceful, innocent. The kind of place no one would ever believe could be a fortress. She wondered if that's what she looked like too, a harmless woman in jeans and flannel, carrying the ghosts of classified missions in her eyes. In town, life went on as if the night had never happened. At the Millbrook Farmers Market, old Mrs. Danner rearranged her pie display and asked if anyone had seen Madison lately. "She's probably baking something," someone replied. "She's a quiet one, that girl, always polite, always smiling, bless her heart." No one imagined that the same woman they chatted with over tomatoes and eggs had spent the night holding 5 armed men at gunpoint. And Madison liked it that way. Normalcy was her camouflage. Across the state line, in a cheap motel off Route 12, Jake Morrison sat on the edge of a bed, staring at a business card. Veterans Assistance Fund, Indianapolis, it read. He looked it up 3 times, half convinced it was fake, but it was. There really was a number, a website, a contact named Brooks. He hadn't told the others he kept the card. Didn't need to. The way she'd looked at him, like she saw through every excuse, every layer of guilt, it still burned behind his eyes. He didn't know if she'd help him or haunt him, maybe both. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the number. He almost didn't call. Then he remembered the way she said, because one bad decision doesn't have to define you. He dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. "Veterans Assistance, how can I help you?" Jake swallowed. Someone told me to call Madison Brooks." There was a pause, a knowing one. "Understood," the voice said. "Let's start with your mother's name." Back in Indiana, Madison stacked firewood by the shed, her muscles moving automatically. The rhythmic sound, wood striking wood, grounded her. It was work she could control, work that didn't bleed. But her mind drifted again, back to the desert. To that night. It had been a simple extraction, a humanitarian convoy ambushed outside Kandahar. Intel said unarmed civilians, but when her team arrived, they walked into chaos, gunfire, screams, dust, confusion. Madison had seen a child, maybe 10, maybe 12, running toward them, waving something in the air. She shouted for her men to hold fire. But the new recruit, scared, eager, didn't wait for orders. One shot. The child fell. Everything after blurred into static. Reports, debriefs, hearings. Command calling it a tragic miscommunication. But Madison had seen the truth. The boy had been holding a white cloth. She'd spoken up. And the army had buried her for it. Sometimes she wondered if that boy's ghost followed her home. If maybe every act of mercy since then, every choice to spare instead of punish, was her way of trying to balance the scale. She went back inside and sat at her desk. On the monitor, the security feed flickered, 4 empty fields, a gravel road, nothing unusual. But Madison zoomed in anyway, studied the distance, the stillness. The truth was, she didn't trust silence. Silence had always been the enemy's favorite disguise. Still, she smiled faintly, for now at least her world was steady again. 3 days later, an untraceable email pinged her inbox. No sender ID, no signature, just a single line of text. "Glad to see you're staying clean." Madison's lips curved into a knowing smirk. "Vince Kowalski." She typed back 2 words. "Keep it that way." Then deleted the thread. She hadn't expected any of them to actually follow through. But some men, given a second chance, surprise you. Maybe he understood what the others hadn't, that she wasn't offering freedom. She was offering consequence disguised as mercy. By week's end, she'd received 3 more messages. Marcus sent a photo of a construction site, steel beams, sunrise, a helmet with his name on it. Jake emailed a copy of his mother's hospital release form and a note that simply said, "She's okay, thank you." Rico's message was different, encrypted, short, unsigned. Just one sentence. "Heading south, won't be a problem again." Tommy never wrote. And that, more than anything, told Madison she'd be hearing about him again, one way or another. That night, as the wind rose through the fields, Madison found herself standing on the porch, listening. The stars above Indiana stretched endless, cold, clear. She wondered how many people in the world right now were sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that danger once stood just a few miles down the road and walked away. Maybe that was enough. Maybe the world didn't need to know who kept it quiet at night. Her voiceover would have said it softly. Not every hero gets a uniform. Some just keep their fences fixed and their rifles clean. She turned to go back inside, pausing at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the doorway light. She could almost hear her old commanding officer's voice from years ago. "You can't save everyone, Brooks." Maybe not, she thought. But she could damn well stop the wrong ones from trying again. Before she went to bed, Madison opened the basement chest one last time. She checked each weapon, safety, maintenance, loadout, routine. Then she closed the lid and locked it. There was peace in preparedness. That was the paradox she lived with. The only way she could sleep was by being ready not to. At dawn, she walked outside again. The sky was a thin blush of pink over the fields. Birds were already singing. Life, it seemed, had forgiven the night. She knelt by the soil, pressing her hands into it, feeling the damp earth against her skin. This was what she'd traded the battlefield for, the weight of real life, the pulse of something that grows instead of destroys. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not the sharp smile of control, but the quiet one of someone who remembers she's still human. The wind carried through the corn like whispers. To anyone else, it was just wind. To Madison Brooks, it sounded like a warning or maybe a promise. Because she knew one thing better than anyone else. Peace never lasted forever. And somewhere out there, in another dark room, someone was already making another bad plan. She'd be ready. Always. How long can peace last before it starts to feel like camouflage? For Madison Brooks, it took 8 days. 8 days of sunrise coffee and the rhythm of chores, the kind of peace she'd once prayed for in the desert. She thought she might finally believe in it. Then the letter arrived. No return address, no stamp from anywhere she recognized, just her name, printed in block letters that felt military, deliberate. She found it wedged in the wire of her front gate at dawn, where no delivery truck ever came. For a moment she just stared. Paper could be harmless, or it could be the start of another war. Inside, one sheet of folded notebook paper. 3 words handwritten. "We remember Syria." Her heart didn't race. It dropped heavy, silent, certain. Syria. The mission that never existed. The one the Pentagon erased. The one she never stopped hearing in her dreams. She went back inside, locked the door, laid the note on the table and studied it like an explosive device. Her breathing slowed automatically, training taking over before emotion could. Whoever left it had been close enough to touch her fence. Close enough to know she'd read it alone. She sat down, staring at the handwriting. Not military block letters after all, too uneven, too human. Someone wanted her to feel it, not just understand it. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" But the only answer was wind through the porch slats. By noon she'd checked every motion sensor, every camera feed, every angle of approach. Nothing. Whoever had come knew how to move, no triggers tripped, no prints left. That narrowed it down. She pulled up an encrypted contact list on her laptop, hesitated, then sent a single coded ping to an old name. Call Hayes Rhett, her former handler, the only one who'd ever told her the truth, even when it cost them both. The reply came 2 hours later. Stay off grid, Syria file reopened, someone talking, not official channels. Her pulse steadied. This wasn't random. Someone had dug up what was never meant to surface. The mission, the child, the truth she tried to bury under 40 acres of corn. That night the sky bruised purple over the fields. Madison stood outside, rifle slung across her back, watching headlights flicker far off on the county road. Nothing unusual, but her gut felt it again, the wrong kind of quiet. She wasn't scared, she was disappointed. She started to believe in stillness again. And stillness, she realized, was always the first thing to betray her. Meanwhile, far away in a low-rent apartment outside Gary, Marcus Webb stared at the same kind of envelope. No letter, just a photo. Him leaving the construction site that morning, a red circle drawn around his face. Underneath, one line written in marker. Brooks can't protect you forever. He crumpled it, hands shaking. He thought that night at the farmhouse was the worst thing he'd ever lived through. Now he wasn't so sure. He called Tommy. No answer. Called again, still nothing. The last he'd heard, Tommy had been bragging about getting even. Maybe he really was that stupid. Marcus didn't sleep. The next morning he packed his things and left town before the sun came up. Back in Millbrook, Madison opened her laptop and watched encrypted feeds from old networks flicker back to life. She hadn't logged into those channels since her discharge. The system still recognized her call sign, Valkyrie 9. A message blinked from a familiar source tag. Someone's leaking names, 2 dead in Damascus last week. You were on the roster. Her hand tightened on the desk, 2 names gone, hers highlighted in red. She leaned back, whispering, so this is what peace costs. By evening, she'd made the house ready again, not just for thieves this time, but for professionals. She rearmed the traps, reset her field of fire, cleaned the rifle twice. It wasn't fear driving her. It was duty crawling back into her skin. But the real enemy wasn't whoever sent the letter. It was the memory attached to it. She closed her eyes, and the farmhouse faded into the sound of rotor blades. Flashback. Heat, dust, the smell of burned plastic and diesel. A convoy stranded in the desert, 2 civilian trucks, 1 military escort. Radio chatter tangled in static. Valkyrie 9, confirm extraction route. Negative, she'd answered, we're pinned. She remembered the child, thin, wide-eyed, running toward them again. Only this time, in the memory, she wasn't fast enough to stop the shot. She'd seen him fall, mouth open but no sound coming out, sand rising like smoke around his small body. And then she'd heard her commanding officer's voice through the comms. Collateral confirmed. Proceed with objective. Something in her had cracked that night. Not loudly, just enough to let the guilt leak through every day after. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the farmhouse kitchen, the storm outside pressing against the windows. Her breath trembled once, then steadied. She poured another cup of coffee even though it was midnight, sat at the table, and stared at the note again. We remember Syria. If we meant what she thought it did, this wasn't over. Not for her. Maybe not for anyone who'd been there. Her mind scanned possibilities like a tactical map. Who could have written it? An old contact, a survivor, revenge. Or someone trying to recruit her again. The phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. She didn't answer. Let it ring out. 10 minutes later it rang again, same number. This time she picked up but said nothing. A man's voice, calm, familiar. Still counting seconds before answering. Brooks, some habits don't die. She froze. Hayes. Not on this line, he said quickly. You need to move. Define move. Out of the house. Burn the drives. Someone's pulling your Delta file from archives. It wasn't just reopened, it was sold. Sold to who? Private network, no flags. Whoever they are, they know your address. Her grip tightened on the phone. Then they're making the same mistake others made. Maybe, Hayes said, but this isn't 5 amateurs with pistols. These people have clearance and motivation. He paused. Madison, you're still marked as KIA in half the classified systems. Someone's correcting that. That means they want you visible. The line clicked dead. Madison stared at the phone, the empty dial tone humming like a countdown. By dawn, she'd packed a go bag, documents, ammo, encrypted drives, 1 photo of her squad. The rest she left behind. But when she stepped onto the porch, she stopped. The air smelled like wet corn and early sunlight. Her land, her refuge, spread out before her, alive and quiet. Leaving meant giving it up. And giving up meant they'd won. She went back inside. If they wanted her visible, she'd stay visible, just not predictable. She spent the next 2 days preparing the way only soldiers do when they expect company but don't know from where. She turned her farmhouse into a chessboard. Hidden sensors under floorboards, mirrored cameras in old mason jars, escape tunnels sealed since the 1940s reopened and cleared. At night she slept on the couch, boots on, rifle across her chest. The letter stayed pinned to the wall, a reminder that ghosts travel faster than mail. But sometimes, while she sat awake listening to crickets and static, she'd think of Jake and his mother, of Marcus trying to rebuild, of Vince somewhere down south sending quiet reports. They'd kept their side of the deal. Maybe that meant she had to keep hers, to keep the world quiet for people who still believed in second chances. On the 3rd night, just after 2 a.m., motion sensors blinked. Sector 3 North Field. She muted the alarm, killed the lights, and moved like smoke through her house, every step muscle memory quiet. At the window, she raised her scope. Nothing but corn. Then movement. A figure half hidden, crossing the rows. Too deliberate to be lost. Too slow to be reckless. She tracked the shape until it reached the edge of the clearing. A flashlight flicked twice, signal pattern. Not random. She aimed higher, finger on the trigger, then stopped. The figure lifted both hands, palms out, no weapon. Then a voice, low, urgent, carried on the wind. Brooks, it's me. Her pulse jumped, that voice. Jake. She lowered the rifle slightly but kept her stance. Jake, what the hell are you doing here? He stepped closer, soaked in rain, breath ragged. I didn't know where else to go. Start talking. They found me, he said. 2 men. Same words as the letter, said Syria, said they knew you'd come looking. She motioned him inside, locking the door behind him. Who sent them? I don't know. They showed me pictures of the farm, of you. Said you weren't who I thought you were. She gave a humorless smile. That part's true. He looked terrified, guilt written all over him. I didn't tell them anything, I swear. I believe you, she said, and she did, but belief didn't mean safety. She handed him a towel, then moved to the window again. Outside, the night pressed in, heavy, waiting. Jake whispered, what are you gonna do? Madison's eyes stayed on the horizon. Same thing I always do. He swallowed, which is? She turned back toward him, face calm, voice steady, the tone of a soldier remembering command. Protect what's left. The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of distant engines. Somewhere out there, headlights were already cutting through the dark, closing in on the quietest farm in Indiana. Madison reached for her rifle. The war she'd tried to leave behind had finally found its way home. How many times can one house become a battlefield before it stops being a home? Madison Brooks heard the first hum of engines before she saw the lights. Two vehicles, maybe three, moving slow, disciplined slow, along the gravel road that ended at her gate. She shut off every interior light and felt the house change around her, its familiar stillness tightening into readiness. Old wood remembered her weight. The boards didn't creak anymore. The farmhouse and the soldier had long since learned each other's rhythms. Behind her, Jake tried to speak. "Is it them?" "Doesn't matter who it is," she said quietly. "The question is what they want." He stood by the wall, pale, drenched from the rain, clutching the towel she'd given him like a lifeline. "I thought you said they'd leave you alone." "I did," she answered, sliding a magazine into her rifle. "I was wrong." Outside, tires ground against wet gravel, the sound too clean to be civilian. Diesel, low RPM, tactical convoy style. They were professionals. Madison exhaled once through her nose, steady, controlled, and crossed to the window. She counted shapes in the dark, a black SUV, another behind it, maybe a third parked farther back. Headlights off, engines running. The front gate camera flicked to static. "They jammed the feed," she murmured. "They know exactly what they're doing." Jake's voice shook. "What do we do?" Madison looked at him. "We hold, we don't panic, and you stay behind cover no matter what happens." She grabbed her radio, thumbed the mic twice, an old Delta code meaning contact at perimeter. Nobody was supposed to be listening, but habit demanded she send it anyway. They waited. The rain thinned to mist. The only sound left was the soft clicking of metal as Madison adjusted her scope, aligning angles she'd measured 100 times in her head. Jake whispered, "Maybe they just want to talk." Madison almost smiled. People who want to talk don't cut power lines first. The farmhouse lights flickered once, then died. Total darkness. Madison's night vision filled with green shapes, the SUV doors opening, silhouettes fanning out in disciplined arcs. 6, 8, 10 men. Rifles held low, body armor, comms earpieces glinting. Private security, not government-issue mercenaries. Jake saw them too through the window and stepped back, panic edging his voice. "They're gonna kill us." Madison stayed crouched, movements deliberate, voice barely above a whisper. "No, Jake, they're going to make a mistake first." She toggled a switch near the floor. From somewhere outside came the muted pop of flares launching, then a low mechanical whir, the motion of shutters sliding into place over ground floor windows. Steel met steel. Jake blinked. "You turned your house into a problem," she finished. The men reached the porch. One of them tapped the door once with the muzzle of his rifle. Another voice, American, mid-30s, calm. "Ms. Brooks, we're not here to hurt you, we just need to talk." Madison called back through the closed door, her tone sharp but measured. "Then you chose the wrong hour and the wrong entrance." "Orders are to bring you in," the voice replied. "You come quietly, no one gets hurt." Madison's finger brushed the trigger guard but didn't press. "Bring you in." That meant whoever hired them knew exactly who she was. "Tell your employer," she said, "I don't answer to ghosts." The man sighed, motioned to the others. Boots shifted on the porch. Jake's breath quickened. Madison whispered, "Down. Crawl space left of the pantry, stay there." "I'm not leaving you." "That's not a request." He obeyed. The first flashbang came through the window. Madison was already turned away, ears covered, body low. The explosion cracked white light through the kitchen, rattling the dishes but leaving her unshaken. Before the echoes faded, she moved, one fluid motion from crouch to fire. 3 shots, controlled bursts. 2 silhouettes dropped, one dragging another back behind a truck. Her voice calmed through the ringing air. "That's your warning." Return fire shredded the porch railing, glass splintering into rain. Madison ducked behind the counter, reloaded, fired again through the curtain gap. Sparks flew from metal. Someone screamed. But even in combat rhythm, her mind stayed detached, analytical. She wasn't killing. She was measuring, aiming for armor plates, disabling, not ending. The years hadn't taken her precision. They just buried it under quieter work. Jake crawled beneath the floorboards, clutching his knees, listening to chaos ripple above him. Every sound was magnified: the thud of boots, the short mechanical bursts of suppressed rifles, the deep, steady rhythm of Madison moving from window to wall. She didn't shout orders, she didn't curse. She moved like a storm rehearsing itself. He realized then that the woman who'd baked bread and sold eggs at the market was gone. This was the soldier the army tried to erase. Outside, rain began again, harder this time, hissing against metal and dirt. The mercenaries regrouped, shouting commands Jake couldn't understand. Then silence. Madison waited. She'd seen this tactic before: lull, reposition, breach. She glanced toward the basement door. That's where they'd come next, through the concrete wall at the rear, weaker, older, easier to breach. She sprinted down the hallway, grabbed a satchel from under the stairs, and tossed it open. 2 flash charges, 1 smoke canister, a short-barrel shotgun. She planted the flash charges by the basement entry and whispered under her breath, "Let's see if you studied your maps." Moments later, the rear wall shook. A muffled boom, plaster dust cascading from the ceiling. Figures pushed through the breach, goggles glowing faintly green. Madison pulled the pin on the smoke, rolled it down the stairs, and counted 3, 2, 1, then flipped the detonator. Light swallowed the basement, followed by confusion, shouting, coughing, stumbling shapes. She moved like she was back in uniform, swift, silent, exact. 2 blows with the rifle stock, a kick to the knee, another scream. Then quiet again. When she emerged from the smoke, 2 men were unconscious, another crawling toward the exit. "Stop," she ordered. He froze. She didn't have to raise the gun. "Who sent you?" He hesitated. "Private contract, off books. We were told to bring you in alive." "Who signed the order?" "I don't." She fired once, deliberately wide, the bullet splintering wood beside his ear. He flinched. "A name, Davenport, something tech, that's all I know." Davenport. The name hit like static through her memory. Major Elias Davenport, the intelligence officer from her Syria team. He was supposed to be dead. Jake climbed out from hiding as she cuffed the surviving intruder with plastic ties. His face was pale, eyes wide. "Madison, there's blood." "None of it's ours," she said, voice level. "Stay behind me." He stared at her, trembling. "They came for you, not for me." "They came for a loose end," she said, "and you're standing next to it." Outside, the remaining mercenaries were pulling back, loading the wounded into the SUVs. One lifted a radio, shouting over the engine noise. "Package uncooperative, retreating to Phase 2. Madison noted the phrase, filed it away. Phase 2. They sped off, taillights swallowed by rain. For a long moment, only the storm spoke. Jake sank into a chair, shaking. "You could have been killed." "So could you," Madison said. "Why didn't you run?" She looked around the ruined kitchen. Shattered glass, bullet holes, smoke curling like ghosts through the air. "Because you can't run from what you built." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means every choice has coordinates. Mine just found me again." She walked to the window, watching the mud trail the vehicles left behind. Somewhere beyond that horizon was a man named Davenport, and with him the answers to every question she'd tried to forget. Jake stood beside her. "What happens now?" Madison's jaw tightened. "Now we stop waiting." That night she worked without rest. While Jake patched bullet holes, she charted routes on a worn topographical map, old army issue, edges faded. Her finger traced south toward Kentucky, where an old training compound once stood. If Davenport was alive, that's where his network would start. She packed light: weapons, ammo, rations, first aid kit, encrypted drive. When she zipped the bag, Jake looked up from the table. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" "I have to find out who's pulling the strings." "You mean kill him?" Madison paused. "I mean finish what someone else started." He hesitated. "Then I'm coming with you." She almost laughed, tired, genuine. "You don't want this life, Jake." "I already have it. The second I walked onto your land, I became part of it." Madison studied him, seeing not the frightened kid from the farmhouse months ago, but someone harder, clearer. "You'll follow orders?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She slung the rifle over her shoulder. "Then get in the truck." As they rolled out before dawn, the fields blurred behind them, mist curling off the corn like smoke from an extinguished fire. Madison kept her eyes on the road ahead. She'd spent years trying to disappear. But maybe her purpose had never been peace. Maybe it was this, the space between justice and vengeance where a soldier could still make something right. Jake broke the silence softly. "Madison, what if this Davenport been waiting for you?" Her hand stayed steady on the wheel. "Then he's about to find out the worst thing you can do to a soldier who wanted peace." She glanced at him, eyes cold, resolute. "Is give her another war." What do you tell a young man when the road you're driving leads back into everything you try to forget? The truck's engine hummed low beneath the rain. Dawn light hadn't broken yet. The world was washed in gray. Madison Brooks kept her hand steady on the wheel, eyes scanning the horizon. Every few miles she checked the mirrors, habit, not fear. Jake sat beside her, quiet, wrapped in a borrowed field jacket several sizes too big. His eyes followed the endless two-lane stretch through the trees. "Where are we going?" "South," she said. "Old training compound near the Kentucky line. If Davenport's alive, he'll have left tracks there." "Who was he?" She didn't answer immediately. A truck passed in the opposite lane, spraying mist against the windshield. Madison waited until the sound faded before speaking. "Major Elias Davenport was intelligence liaison for my team in Syria. Smart, careful, the kind of man who always had an extra layer of clearance." She paused. "When the mission went bad, he wrote the report that buried it and me." "So he blamed you for the civilian deaths?" "No," she said softly. "He erased them, that's worse." Jake looked out the window again, letting the silence settle between them. He didn't know what to say to a soldier whose enemies were paperwork and ghosts. 2 hours later, they stopped at a gas station outside Louisville, one of those forgotten highway spots where the lights flicker and the clerk never looks up. Madison fueled the truck while Jake grabbed coffee and maps. When he came out, she was staring at a notice board near the pump, a missing persons flyer dated only 3 days earlier. "Something wrong?" he asked. She tapped the flyer. The woman's name read Claire Davenport. "His daughter," Madison whispered. "Last known address Lexington." Jake frowned. "Maybe it's coincidence." Madison shook her head. "Davenport doesn't leave coincidences." She tore the flyer from the board and folded it carefully. "Looks like the past isn't the only thing missing." They drove on. The sky lightened to pale silver, rain easing into drizzle. Farmland gave way to hills. Madison's mind worked through patterns. How many people would Davenport need? How he'd fund mercenaries off books? The answer always came back to the same truth. Someone was helping him. Jake broke the quiet. "Back at the farmhouse, you said every choice has coordinates. What were yours that night in Syria?" Madison's jaw tightened. "You already know what happened." "I know a kid died. I don't know why you're still paying for it." She exhaled. "Because I gave the order that should have saved him. Because the shot wasn't mine, but the responsibility was. Because someone higher up told us to proceed, and I didn't disobey fast enough." Jake studied her profile. "You were following orders." Exactly, she said, bitterness threading through the calm. That's the problem. He hesitated. Is that why you didn't kill those men at your house? Madison nodded once. Killing, easy. Living with it, that's the lifelong mission. By late morning, they reached the outskirts of Lexington. The address on the flyer led them to a narrow residential street lined with rain-soaked maples. The house looked ordinary, white siding, blue shutters, mailbox rusting at the edges, but the door hung slightly open. Madison parked a block away. Stay in the truck. Not a chance, Jake said. She gave him a look that used to silence entire squads, but he didn't back down. Finally, she sighed. Fine, stay behind me. If I stop, you stop. They approached through the drizzle. The house was silent except for the gutter drip. Madison's hand brushed the door. It creaked wider. The smell of damp wood and something faintly chemical drifted out. Inside, furniture overturned. A mug shattered near the sink, and on the wall, drawn in dark marker, 3 words. We remember Syria. Jake's breath caught, same as the note. Madison crouched, scanning the floor. Footprints. Mud. Boot size 11, military tread. 2, maybe 3 people. She moved deeper, checking corners with the smooth precision of someone who'd cleared rooms her entire adult life. In the living room, she found a laptop still open on a coffee table. Screen cracked, hard drive removed. Whoever took it knew exactly what they wanted. Jake whispered, "Do you think she's dead?" Madison didn't answer. Her gaze had landed on a small photograph half hidden under the sofa, a smiling woman in her 30s, arm around a man in uniform. Davenport. The same sharp eyes, the same clean-cut arrogance. She slipped the photo into her pocket. He's not after me because of Syria, she murmured. He's after me because I'm the only one left who knows what he did. They spent the afternoon off the grid, parked under an old overpass while rain hammered down. Madison cleaned her rifle, silent, movements deliberate. Jake sat across from her, tracing lines on the stolen map. So what now? He asked. We find Davenport's daughter. If she's alive, she's leverage. If not, she trailed off. Jake frowned. You really think it hurt his own family? Madison looked up. Men who sell their country stop recognizing family. He watched her for a long moment. You don't really believe anyone can change, do you? She thought of the thieves who'd broken into her house, the fear in their faces, the shaky emails that followed, the single line from Vince every month, still clean. Some people can, she said finally. Others can only stop pretending. They reached the training compound by nightfall, what was left of it. The gate stood half-collapsed, weeds swallowing the chain link. Buildings beyond lay in silhouette, hollow shells of barracks and hangars. Madison parked the truck under a copse of trees. This place used to be classified, she said quietly. Delta used it for black-budget drills. Then they shut it down, or so they said. Jake looked around. Feels like a graveyard. That's because it is. She stepped out, rifle ready, boots crunching on wet gravel. Each breath turned to mist. The air carried the stale scent of gun oil and rust. Somewhere, metal clanged, a loose sheet twisting in the wind. They crossed into the main building. Inside, walls were stripped bare except for a single map pinned to a corkboard. Lines connected points across the Middle East, Damascus, Raqqa, Aleppo, and one marked in red ink, Ops Silent Witness. Jake squinted. That's the mission. Madison nodded slowly. The one that never existed. A faint beep drew her attention. She turned toward a small desk at the far end. A laptop hummed, screen glowing faintly blue, camera light on. Someone had left it running. Madison moved closer, weapon raised. The feed displayed a video window already open, grainy, live. And then a man's face filled the screen. Elias Davenport. He looked older, gray at the temples, eyes tired but sharp. "Hello, Sergeant," he said, voice calm. "If you're watching this, I assume you've survived my welcoming committee." Jake muttered, welcoming committee, he means. The men at the farm, Madison finished. Davenport continued. Before you decide to shoot the screen, listen. You think Syria broke you. It didn't. It broke me. I saw what they made us do, what we covered up. But unlike you, I learned to use it. You hide on farms. I built a business on truth no one wants spoken. He leaned closer to the camera. There's still one piece missing, the original footage from that day. You took it. I want it back. Madison's stomach tightened. He's lying, she whispered, but deep down she knew he was. The video flickered. Davenport's tone dropped, almost kind. Bring it to me, Madison. Lexington, old water treatment plant, midnight tomorrow, or more people vanish. You remember Claire. The feed cut to black. For a long time neither of them spoke. Rain drummed on the roof. Jake finally said, "Do you have that footage?" Madison didn't look at him. "I thought I destroyed it." "But you didn't." "No," she touched the chain around her neck, the small drive hidden beneath her shirt. "Some truths need witnesses, even if it kills you." Jake's eyes searched hers. "You can't go alone." "I have to. I'm not letting you walk into a trap." She almost smiled. "It's not a trap if you already know it's there." They left the compound before dawn. The storm had cleared. The world smelled of wet asphalt and pine. Madison drove without speaking, the weight of old guilt pressing against her chest like armor she couldn't remove. In the distance, the first light touched the horizon, turning the clouds gold. Jake watched it and said quietly, "You ever think about what happens after all this?" "After? When it's over?" Madison's hands tightened on the wheel. "For people like me, it doesn't end. It just changes coordinates." He looked at her profile, saw the faint scar along her jaw, the steady eyes that never seemed to rest. "Maybe it ends when you forgive yourself." She didn't answer. The truck rolled on through the dawn, carrying them toward Lexington, toward Davenport, toward whatever truth still waited in the dark. Sometimes peace isn't something you find. Sometimes it's something you fight for one last time. And as the sun rose behind them, Madison Brooks knew the next 24 hours would decide which part of her survived. The soldier who obeyed, or the woman who finally stopped. How do you face the man who turned your silence into his weapon? Madison Brooks drove the last miles into Lexington under a cold blue sky. The night had finally broken, but daylight didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like exposure. The city was waking. Trucks rolled past, headlights fading, streets slick from rain. Madison's hand stayed loose on the wheel, every sense tuned to what waited ahead. Jake sat beside her, quiet. He hadn't argued again about coming. He knew there was no stopping her, but she could feel the question sitting on his tongue. "You don't have to do this," he said at last. She didn't answer. The truth was simpler than courage. She did. Not because she wanted revenge. That part of her had already died somewhere in the sand. But because some truths rot the world if you let them stay buried. They parked 2 blocks from the old water treatment plant. The place loomed on the edge of an abandoned industrial zone, all rusted pipes and concrete ghosts. Crows perched on the railings, black silhouettes against gray light. Madison scanned the perimeter through binoculars. 2 guards northwest corner, one on the catwalk, probably more inside. Jake swallowed. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure I've been in worse places with fewer options." She checked her rifle, adjusted the sling, and glanced at him. "You stay here. If I'm not out by sunrise, drive west until the road runs out." He shook his head. "No chance." Her tone softened. "Jake, there's a difference between surviving and being ready to die. Don't mix them up." He stared at her for a long moment, jaw tight, then finally nodded. "Just come back." Madison gave a faint smile, the kind that almost looked like peace. Then she stepped out of the truck and disappeared into the dawn. Inside the plant, everything smelled of rust and rainwater. Her boots made no sound on the concrete floor. Shadows shifted between beams of weak morning light. She moved through them like memory, steady, patient, invisible. Her earpiece hummed once. A voice came through, smooth, measured, almost amused. "You never could stay dead, could you?" Madison froze. The acoustics gave him away second level near the filtration tanks. She raised her rifle, scanning upward. "Davenport," she said quietly, "you always did love a stage. And you always did know how to ruin an entrance." His voice echoed, calm and sharp. "Put the gun down, Sergeant. We both know this doesn't have to end like last time." Madison moved toward the stairs, every sense alive. "Last time ended with a body you pretended wasn't there." "Collateral," he said simply. "War requires perspective. War requires humanity." He chuckled. "Humanity doesn't win wars." She reached the landing. There he was, Elias Davenport, leaning against a rusted pipe, dressed in a gray suit too clean for the place, pistol hanging loosely at his side. His hair had gone silver at the edges. His smile hadn't aged a day. "8 years," he said, "and here you are still trying to save the world from people like me." Madison kept her rifle leveled. "Not the world, just the truth." He motioned toward a metal case on a nearby table. "Then give me what's around your neck, the original file, the footage from Syria. You've carried it long enough." Madison's voice stayed steady. "You think you deserve to rewrite it again." "I don't want to rewrite it," he said. "I want to control it. You think the public can handle the truth? One video like that could unravel everything. I'm trying to protect the same people you claim to care about." "That's not protection," she said softly. "That's corruption with better lighting." Davenport's expression hardened. "You don't understand the game." "I stopped playing." He lifted the pistol, not quite aiming yet. "Last chance, Madison. Give me the drive and I let you walk away. No more running, no more ghosts." She stared at him, the man who had buried the boy, the mission, and her name, and felt something unexpected: pity. "You already let the ghosts win," she said. And then she dropped the drive on the floor, between them. Davenport's eyes flicked down. "Good decision." Madison took one step back. "Not really." She fired once, not at him, but at the pipe above his head. Pressurized steam exploded outward, hissing white clouds across the room. Davenport cursed, stumbled back, blind in the vapor. Madison kicked the drive into the steam, then rolled to cover as bullets tore through the air. For a few seconds it was chaos, echoes, gunfire, boiling mist. Then silence. She crouched low, scanning. "You always were predictable, Eli." He laughed somewhere behind the tanks. "And you were always sentimental." Madison moved, sliding along the wall. Through the haze she saw a shadow, his, crossing to the ladder. He was heading for the catwalk, higher ground. She followed, careful, heart steady. At the top, wind whistled through broken windows. Light streaked across the metal, cold and gray. Davenport stood near the edge, pistol aimed at her chest. "Don't," she said. He smiled. "After everything you've done, you still think you deserve to give orders." "After everything you've done," she said, "you still think you deserve forgiveness." He hesitated, just long enough for her to see it. The flicker of something human. Then he fired. The bullet caught her shoulder, hot, tearing, but she stayed upright. The impact spun her halfway, pain flooding through her arm. She didn't scream. She just breathed through it and returned fire once. The shot hit his thigh. Davenport fell hard, weapon skidding across the floor. They froze there, two soldiers who'd run out of lies. Madison lowered her gun and stepped closer. Blood dripped down her sleeve. Davenport looked up at her, face pale. "You think killing me changes anything?" "I'm not here to kill you," she said quietly. "I'm here to make sure people remember." He frowned. "What people?" She nodded toward the catwalk railing, where Jake now stood, camera in hand, recording everything. Davenport's eyes widened. "You brought him." Madison's tone softened. Someone has to see what truth looks like. The older man's expression shifted, anger, disbelief, almost admiration. You really are your own worst enemy. Maybe, she said, but I can live with that. He reached for his pistol. She kicked it away. Don't make me choose again, she said. Davenport looked up at her, something breaking behind his eyes, arrogance finally collapsing into fear. You'll regret this. I already do, she said. And then softly, but at least it's mine. They left him alive, bound, bleeding, and finally visible. By the time federal authorities arrived, tipped anonymously from a secure signal sent minutes later, Davenport's empire was already unraveling. The footage she'd kept for years was in the right hands now, copies encrypted and scattered. There would be hearings, headlines, denials, but there would also be proof. For the first time since Syria, Madison Brooks didn't feel like she was hiding. 3 weeks later, the farm was quiet again. The fields had grown tall, golden, swaying in late summer wind. Madison sat on the porch, arms still in a sling, coffee steaming in her hand. Jake was mending a fence nearby, humming something low and steady, the kind of sound peace makes when it finally believes itself. He called over, "You ever gonna rest?" She smiled faintly. "This is resting. You could have handed that drive over and disappeared." "I tried disappearing," she said. "Turns out it's louder than fighting." He nodded, hammer tapping against the post. "So what now?" Madison looked across the land where morning light broke clean over the fields. "Now, we grow things, we fix fences, we wait for the next storm." Jake grinned. "You really think it'll come?" Her eyes softened. Storms always come, but so does morning. Later that evening, she walked out to the edge of the property, where the fence met the horizon. The sun was setting, the sky painted in fire and ash. She could still hear the faint hum of traffic miles away, the world moving on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She thought about the boy in Syria, about Davenport, about the 5 men who once tried to rob her and found mercy instead of punishment. Every story, she realized, had the same question at its center. What kind of person are you when no one's watching? She stood there a long time, watching shadows stretch across the fields. The wind carried her voice when she finally spoke, soft, like a prayer meant only for herself. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak," she murmured. "It simply acts." And somewhere between the silence and the sunset, she felt it, not victory, not forgiveness, but something smaller, steadier. The quiet kind of peace that doesn't erase the past, but learns to live beside it. That night, as darkness fell over the farm, a single porch light glowed against the endless fields. The same light that had once drawn danger toward her now standing as a beacon of something different. A reminder that even broken soldiers can build something whole again. And if anyone passed by on that empty road, they might have wondered about the woman sitting alone in the glow of that light. The one who looked calm and strong and utterly unafraid. They'd never guess what she'd lived through. They'd never know the wars she'd fought, both outside and within. And that was exactly how Madison Brooks wanted it. Because true strength, she'd learned, doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to endure. Sometimes redemption isn't about winning back what you lost. It's about choosing not to lose yourself again.